Maximize your sense of aliveness, gain new perspectives on health, your body, and the meaning of life. You can control your physiology and how you feel in your body in this moment. Your life will never be the same. This is the Vitality Podcast with Andrea Page.
We're recording. Yay, Brian. Okay, so to clue everyone else in, I met Brian at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas a few weeks ago, and I was just doing a little recharge and sweat in the saunas, and then you came in the sauna with me and started telling me about the lights and the EMF radiation. And as someone who's been in the health scene for 15 years, I've heard a lot of people talking out their ass. And I was just like, hey, this guy is really genuine. And so hence the invitation to come on the podcast. And so I'm not going to do any introduction of you because I want you to do it, Brian. So please introduce yourself to this audience. And if you could do so by sharing a little bit about your own personal history and where that brought you into the world of exploration of health.
Well, thank you, Andy. Yes, my name is Brian Richards. I'm the CEO and also founder of SaunaSpace. We make incandescent light therapy saunas. And though it's not the only aspect of who I am, it's definitely central to who I am as an adult and in my professional life. That's because the product that SaunaSpace makes, or the product line that we make, personally healed my health issues many years ago. Now, I guess that would be 7 or 8 years ago. So rewind to 2009, I was just graduated with a couple of degrees out of college, Montana State University. That's where I grew up. Although I spent many years studying abroad, I eventually got dragged back to finish things there. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, my health was not fantastic. Even though if you met me in the street, I looked fine. I had what I know now to be adrenal fatigue. That's self-diagnosed, and I didn't know what it was then. I just felt negative and irritable and low energy. And I also had really weird kind of acne around my torso. So, but it's obviously a nebulous thing to diagnose even for more wellness-minded health practitioners. But the dermatologist wanted to prescribe Accutane and other weird things, and I wasn't. Oh la la. I wasn't going to take any of that prescription stuff, and I wanted to address the root cause of the issue. That seemed the most logical to me. So, I did my Google research online, like everybody does nowadays, to try to discover for themselves, hey, what else might be going on here? And I kept coming back to sauna, and as it relates to detoxification, and then I stumbled upon this interesting concept called the incandescent sauna. So it actually dates back to Dr. John Harvey Kellogg's sanitariums, 1891. Those of you who don't know, he's responsible for Kellogg's cornflakes as it is today, kind of, but he was very avant-garde in many ways. He had these health sanitariums, health spas in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he invented what he called the electric incandescent bath in 1891, shortly after the light bulb itself was invented. That, hey, let's shine these light bulbs on people and it will heal their maladies, and it'll be like a sauna but better. And so you can see these. And in his book, he wrote a book called Phototherapeutics in 1910. It was really a fascinating treatise on light therapy, way before we understood what mitochondria were, this kind of the central vehicle for light therapy in the body, and for all this stuff we call red light therapy nowadays, those of you in the biohacker world, or it's increasingly mainstream now, using light to heal through the mitochondrial activation, through the mitochondrial systems, which are pretty universal in the body. Anyway, I was like, oh, I can build my own. And I actually found a modern book called Sauna Therapy for Detox and Healing by Dr. Lawrence Wilson. And I built my own incandescent light therapy sauna. And nice. And it was amazing. Two sauna sessions right before bed, and my insomnia was gone. And I didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know it was very strong parasympathetic relaxation, which
Mm-hmm.
is essential to have the nervous system relaxed to sleep well and deeply. But
Mm-hmm.
boom, 2 sessions, and I was sleeping great. And then over the course of 6 months of disciplined use each week, 4 or 5 days a week, 40 minutes or even more, all my problems kind of resolved, and I realized there were things that were wrong with me. I didn't know they were wrong with me. So I'm 6 months later. I definitely have all the things that you associate with sauna now, improved cognitive functioning and such. I was more clear-headed, more
Mm-hmm.
energetic, more patient, less irascible, more able to concentrate and focus. My acne cleared up. My sleep patterns were much better. Really just revitalized in a way that is qualitatively better. That you can't, again, hard to quantify. And it's something where if you met me before, it's hard to explain that you just feel like crap, but just totally different and totally so much better. And that was the inspiration for where I am now. Now it's 6 years of development to kind of obsessively just make one thing right. It started as a side gig, and then it kind of took control of my life. And I realized, wow, I really like what I'm doing. And so here we are today. I have kind of a big shop we just moved into, about 23 employees. We are hiring as well. And we're just, we can't seem to make enough of them fast enough. We definitely have an evolved product, but the concept is the same. It's to, hey, sit there, sweat passively under some heat source, and it cleanses the body, and it actually cleanses the mind too. Now we know as well. And then we can talk about light therapy as well. It's something that most saunas don't have at all. And it's really an essential part of our lives. People think of sunlight as being ultraviolet and vitamin D, right? Like, oh, I need to go, I'm not getting enough vitamin D. Well, actually, ultraviolet's a small portion of sunlight. The largest plurality of the sun spectrum is near infrared. It's like 43%. It's a big portion. And those are the wavelengths that stimulate our mitochondria, promote cellular regeneration, anti-aging effects, just quite a wide array of cellular healing effects. And they make us feel good. It's definitely a mood enhancement thing that, we see that supported by the studies now. So if you're not getting sunlight, and as an ancestral habit, as we got ancestrally, it's near infrared that you're missing primarily, more so than the ultraviolet. It's the ultraviolet and the blue light that are primarily killing you, actually. They're very high energy. They cause free radical formation, or they are, they actually damage your DNA like ultraviolet. Whereas the near infrared red wavelengths are regenerative. So we've incorporated that into the sauna by using an incandescent light source that's very close to the sun spectrum, but without the ultraviolet and the blue. So it's like all of the goodness of sunlight while you're doing the sauna. And so it has its own benefits, and it also kind of supports and it facilitates the benefits of heat therapy, which we should also talk about, because that's much more than just detox.
Totally.
That's kind of like the whirlwind tour of how I got to here today. And definitely a lot of funny little stories in there, but I basically started it at my house and bootstrapped it and got my own small business loan, and kind of made my way, and with a lot of roller coaster rides, to where we're now. We're kind of a growing name in the sauna industry and in the world, as it were.
I love it. I love it. Very, very natural story, very organic kind of upbringing. And I want to take a second and kind of put several of the things you've mentioned into context for my audience, because Kellogg was one of the original natural hygienists, and that's the school of thought that I come from. And a lot of my teachers were amongst his peers in the early 1900s, late 1800s. This was the time where pre-heavy industrialization of man, we had this switching from a natural outdoor lifestyle to a mechanized indoor sedentary lifestyle. And in that process, of course, so many parts of our health went into disarray, as you experienced fully in your own personal trajectory. adrenal fatigue is nothing other than just being out of balance. And you know, you can go to a yoga class and they say, oh, be balanced or feel balanced or whatever it is, and we can't quantify that, and yet you touch the heartbeat of it, or perhaps the nerve palpation of it, which is very much the parasympathetic nervous system and that relaxation response which is needed. And we need to be in parasympathetic far more than in sympathetic, and yet it's switched today. And so when humans are so active in flight or fight, a whole array of other problems come, whether it's endocrine based and having hormonal imbalance, or whether it's just adrenal fatigue because you are secreting too much adrenaline, cortisol, and essentially we're driving ourselves mad from our head, or whether it's any kind of a heart problem or an emotional psychosomatic translation, whatever it is, it stems back to not feeling safe, not feeling calm, not feeling like you belong, whatever it might be. And so natural hygiene came forth to bring those nature principles into our everyday life. And it's almost like ironic that we have to create a second sun to go sit in this little box that is, you know, a mimic of the sun, and yet it is something so perfect for the everyday human. And it's like we will always create new anthills upon anthills of this concrete jungle that we've built. And so it works in its biomimicry. And there's a lot more depth that I want to get into, because it's not only that it's just let's say giving you the near infrared light and you know, giving you the things from the sun that you wouldn't get elsewise from being inside. But I know everything that you're doing with the protection layer and all of the other layers that kind of speak to modern man. I want to get into those as well. So which is most exciting to you from what you've discovered in the SaunaSpace?
Oh, there is much to talk about, and I don't want to get too stuck in one thing or another, but I would like to discuss man-made electromagnetic stress and where it comes from and what to do about it, and
tell me about it,
so forth. But I'll leave you in suspense about that topic for a second. And
okay,
actually, I'd like to mention something that I just find really almost as exciting, just as exciting about heat therapy. So, you know, every human culture has some kind of sauna tradition of some kind, whether it's hot baths or sweat lodges. It goes back thousands of years, and what our ancestors understood is that it does cleanse the body, and it has clinical, you know, studies are very strongly indicating increased longevity, improved cognitive functioning, a lot of amazing things that heat therapy does. But I think one of the fascinating things that I've read about lately has to do with hormonal homeostasis and reducing insulin resistance. So most people, again, know or have an appreciation maybe that saunas do detox. And the way that works is we heat up the cells, and the cell begins to express heat shock proteins that are little cellular repairman. Their primary role, their first role, is to help make detoxification at the cell level more efficient. They help chaperone things and so forth. They have a second role, though, that is much more intriguing, I think. That the second role is to refold proteins. So 20 or 30% of the proteins in our body, it's estimated nowadays, or even just in general, are misfolded. And if you've ever seen a protein structure on a 3D model of it, it looks like a bunch of ribbons, and it's a very complicated thing that's like long, super complicated 3D wad of paper with all these ribbons. And so if it's not folded perfectly, it doesn't communicate well and signal well or perform its function well. And so, for example, the insulin receptor tail that hangs off the cell that is responsible for receiving the insulin signal, that has proteins on it. If those proteins are malfolded or misfolded, you get insulin resistance. And when you have insulin resistance, it leads to metabolic disorder and obesity, and just, really insulin resistance is it's one of the first symptoms you have of, like, you have a real big problem. You have terrible illness in your body. And a lot of people are insulin resistant nowadays. So it's a very, I think, relevant problem nowadays. A lot of people dealing with insulin resistance, obesity, metabolic disorders and diseases. And so the heat shock protein can, when you just heat the body up through sauna, can go out there and refold the insulin receptor proteins and make insulin signaling work better, which reduces insulin resistance. And we see this not just in vitro, but in human studies now. So you can actually change how the body is talking to itself. The hormones are kind of the messengers in between the organ systems. They're super important for signaling and all these other basic regulatory aspects in the body. And if those signals are not working right, we have major diseases. But here's such a simple way, on top of all the other benefits of sauna, of detox, of longevity and other things, that sauna is actually re-sculpting the proteins of your body, and it's helping some detox and be excised, be through autophagy, and then others are, just repaired and refolded, and they work great again. So, and we have a systemic effect in, for example, reducing insulin resistance. So I think that speaks volumes in regards to all the other hormones in the body and all these other proteins, all the receptors in the body, all the messengers. Many of the messengers at the cell level are protein based, and there's things called proteostasis, where there's optimal concentrations of proteins inside and outside of the cell, and heat shock proteins go and really fix all of that holistically in almost every cell of the body where they can be made. And all of this is going on if you just sit down and do this sauna therapy. And so, and they also have a relation to light therapy. So some wavelengths of red light and also near-infrared light have been shown to increase expression of heat shock proteins. So that's a clear indication of the ancestral context and light and heat needing to come together from the sun, from the incandescent light source. The near-infrared light, photobiomodulating the mitochondria, is also increasing or helping the cell make heat shock proteins better and make them work better. Some wavelengths of near-infrared red naturally stimulate collagen production. Well, this collagen scaffolding requires heat shock protein, I think like 47 or 70 for building of the scaffolding. So and that's in embryonic development, also in adults too. Like the collagen's not really rebuilt very effectively in your body at all without that heat shock protein as a chaperone. And so just a small microcosm I'm giving you here of how these are all interacting together, the heat, the light, and you can do all of that in basically our type of sauna, where you have both of these elements married together from the same, the source, the incandescent bulb.
So Brian, a lot of what I do, or what I've done in my career, and a lot of what this podcast has been for people, is taking that microcosm and making it the macrocosm, to more or less speak to people in their own lives, how this would feel and affect in their body. So I want you to unpack it with me. We can do it together. The journey from insulin resistance, what that would feel like. Maybe it would feel like a certain sluggishness or a need for sugar, even though your body's not processing it. And just a lethargy throughout life on a mental, on a physical, and on a physiological level. And then when you start to go into the heat shock therapy a la sauna, and or the equivalent of which would be being outside direct under sunlight, would you say that that's equivalent?
If it was early morning and late day sunlight.
Early morning, late day sunlight. Okay.
There's too much ultraviolet blue in the middle of the day, and ancestral humans definitely, they lean towards the morning and the evening. And of course, in the evening during sunset, blue light is higher frequency. It travels faster. So during the sunset, the blue light stimulus has ended, and you're left with red near infrared. So you get a big kind of regenerative dose there. At the end of the day, but yeah, it's more than that though, because you need to sit there and sweat. And so if you're very light skinned, for example, it's and where we are in the modern global society, you're probably, or you may not necessarily be living in your ethnic latitude, and so you're not necessarily where you're designed to be. Or for people who are darker skinned, they need a lot more sunlight than a light-skinned person in terms of near-infrared dose that they're designed to get. So yeah, if you can live naked at your latitude of your ethnicity and live, wake up with the sunrise and go to bed with the sunset, not have any blue light after dark, and uh, a rather strict formula nowadays, actually, and pretty hard for people to achieve, then yeah, okay. If not, though, I think we need modern adaptations to recreate a natural healing context in modern life, so regular people can do what they love, follow their modern passion, and still be healthy. As far as kind of connecting the microcosm of the heat shock proteins and the insulin resistance to the macro, I think it's easy enough to say, look, you have these people who are really obese, and they say one day they wake up and say, you know what, I'm changing my diet. I'm going to start cooking my own food. I'm going to the gym today. I'm going to get that exercise I never get. And so they do that. They go and run on the treadmill, and maybe they start cooking their own food, and they may experience not much change, or very much difficulty changing. That's because because they have so much insulin resistance, because their proteins are so messed up that it doesn't matter. Their dietary changes are only a small step now, and even the exercise that they never did before, it's not nearly enough. We need to go in and fix those proteins so the body understands what sugar level it's getting when it's eating food. And so these people, they're trying to correct their obesity, correct their metabolic disorder, their disease, and they need to realize that they need to rebuild the proteins in most of the cells of their bodies, or refold them and resculpt them. And that doesn't just happen through dietary change. It can be achieved through sauna in a very safe, low risk fashion. But it's a necessary element. It's not enough just the diet. And so people wonder why they take one bite of a cookie and their blood sugar levels go crazy, and it's just frankly hard, and they don't have much success necessarily. And this is a big part of it. They're insulin resistant, so their proteins are broke down, and their cellular systems are all kind of working at whatever you want to call it, 50% efficiency or something like that. And there's no easy solution to that. We need to rebuild everything. And that takes the discipline of the diet, lifestyle, and I would say sauna.
Yeah, for sure. And the precursor to that, if I may, is definitely hydration, because the detoxification, the sweat, the light, all of that's important. And yet I don't think that our cells are fully able to be buoyant enough to receive whatever it is unless they are properly hydrated with mineral spring water.
Yes, I completely agree. We need water as an essential element of life. It needs, you need to have good water. I would say, though, that for those of you who are familiar with structured water, or the fourth state of water, Dr. Pollack calls it, it's basically a smart state of water where the ionic charge in a big body of water, or a grouping of water molecules becomes intelligent. Basically, it's not random, and it results in like a gel-like state. And the inside of your cells are supposed to be like that. And inside of the mitochondria, it's all structured water. And in between the cells, the more structured water, the better. You have better movement of everything in the cell with less energetic input. And there's some arguments that, like the sodium potassium pump and basic cellular systems are not primarily fueled by cellular energy called ATP. There's an alternative hypothesis, and that's that everything is structured. All the water is structured in this smart state, and it's like this gel state. So what's interesting is, well, how do you structure water? You can blend it up in a blender, kind of like the water at the end of a waterfall. It's all structured. And but you can also shine sunlight on it. And so near infrared light and visible light, but also near infrared light and mid infrared and stuff, they structure water. So you can also just leave dead water out under these lamps that we use, or under sunlight, and it turns it into like nature's smart water, which is again called structured water. And it's an essential part of living healthy and eating or having a healthy lifestyle but instead of consuming structured water, which is kind of a thing you can buy in bottles nowadays, you can actually structure the water inside your body by shining light on your body. And another source of water forms a structured state against an ionized surface. So if you make bone broth, the water in the bone broth, slowly as it's kind of percolating there in the pot, slowly making the broth, is slowly structuring itself against the collagen in the water. And so, homemade bone broth is an amazing source of structured water as well.
So tell me more about the structured water under sunlight, because I'm a huge fan of solar charged water, and I love the concept of doing that for yourself. And my question in that regard is, would you have to put the sun or the water out in the sun at the same hours as you had recommended for a human to put their body in the sun?
No, not at all. All wavelengths of sunlight structure water. Some do it more effectively than others. And so you can deep dive into the science of that. Dr. Pollack's work, he's the guy, right? Really, he calls it the fourth state of water. But you can also structure water by basically sloshing it around and whipping it in a vortex very vigorously. Right. The more you do that, the more it just naturally forms this state where there's kind of this smart distribution of charges. It's not just positive and negative charges, where water's a charged molecule. It has a positive side and a negative side. And so there's this, now that's been discovered, even though that's kind of looked at from a conventional medical perspective as nonsense, it has such relevance in biology that it's important to consider and important to understand. But I do think it's a mistake to say, well, I just need to start drinking structured water. Not only should it be spring water and be from this amazing water source, it should be structured as well. Well, actually, the cells can use ATP to kind of structure the water in the cell. And then also, if you shine near-infrared light from these lamps or also sunlight onto your naked body, it's structuring the water that's already in your body, which is a much more efficient way to do it than consuming water that's already structured.
So let me get that clear. So solar charging water in sunlight, swishing it around, and that's a biomimicry of like what you would see in a whirlpool, which is the way to not only purify the water and make the bacteria rise to the top or evaporate, but it's also structuring the water and then drinking the water and putting the water that's already in your body under the quality of sauna that you describe to structure everything.
Yeah, that you have it right. So ancestral humans were naked under sunlight. That's the primary way to kind of structure water in your body. Your body can structure its own water. It's constantly doing that at the cellular level, but you can really assist it and give it a boost by just putting your naked body under sunlight, or you can sit in front of an incandescent lamp, like what we use in the SaunaSpace sauna, and it also structures water. You could also just take a glass of water or even your coffee and put it in front of one of these lamps inside your house, and it would structure the water. And so some people do that. But I'm a big fan of, in all of this, we need to keep in mind, I'm not trying to replace sunlight here. Sunlight is the best. The sun nourishes all life on Earth. We wouldn't be here if not for that. But if we can't maintain that very discipline, now what you would call nowadays a disciplined ancestral lifestyle, here's the next best thing, is what I would say. And it is important to understand that the natural context is best. That's literally what we're trying to do here at SaunaSpace, with the full spectrum light, the passive sweating, the parasympathetic relaxation, and the electromagnetic protection, so that we're not, dealing with this weird modern phenomenon of microwave in the air everywhere.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking about like a VR experience to add to the sauna, or like some kind of audio soundtrack to like bring the birds in, a little bit of wind with the sun experience to really replicate that on all levels. It's comical to think about. I want to ask you though, Brian, something. in relation to the aspect of, I mean, you mentioned UV rays and you mentioned them before as potentially damaging. I mean, UV rays are actually the most, one of the most potent phenomenons on Earth, in that they are one of the greatest disinfectants ever. And so just like a super sharp sword has two sides. And I want you to talk, since you've done so much research about sunlight, natural sunlight, light, heat, et cetera, healing, a little bit about sunscreen.
Oh yes. Well,
Oh yeah.
I try not to get too conspiratorial about these things, so
I love it. Bring it on. This
but,
audience knows it very well.
Well, so sunscreen is, I mean, in short, you're slathering on potentially carcinogenic chemicals to block out the healing stimulus of the sun's full spectrum that, again, nourishes all life on Earth. So it's a little bit insane on the face of it, but let's go into the details of what it does. Some sunscreen has zinc oxide, which is okay. It's not a toxic metal. It's not a nanoparticle. It's zinc. It's an oxidized zinc, and it that's the kind of ones where it, you can see it, like it's opaque, and they have pink, yellow ones, and it kind of looks funny. So there is that can be useful, especially for people with very light skin, and they want to be out in the middle of the day for some reason. That does have a protective component to it, but it's really the other chemicals in there that are problematic. There's a lot of petrochemical additives that are not healthy for the body, and you can just list them, and you can just look up phthalates and parabens and all that stuff, and it's not good for you. And then the modern sunscreens, they're using like nanoparticles now for quicker, deeper penetration of things, and there's really not long-term studies on humans necessarily on what that will do to you eventually. But I think it's another look. If it's coming from petroleum, it's not something we're designed to really slather on our bodies so much, and it's not in a natural form. It's a very synthetic form, and I would really question what you're doing. Not to mention that what are some of these things doing? If it's not zinc oxide, well, what are these other sunscreens doing that don't have the zinc oxide in them? They're not really blocking. One thing that they do is they prevent the kind of nitric oxide response your body has where your skin turns red. So normally you don't want to wear sunscreen or you don't wear sunscreen, and you don't want to wear sunglasses either, because the eyes are the kind of window to the soul, literally, and the window to our brains and how we interpret things around us, much more than any other sense faculty that we have. It's really our eyesight that's so important. So when you're outside in a really hot day, like in Puerto Rico, where I was just recently, you don't want to be wearing sunglasses or contacts or glasses of any kind, because your eyes will be the first interpreter to tell you, hey, I got enough sunlight. And if you block your eyes through sunglasses or contacts, your body's not getting the first indication that, hey, my skin got enough sun. I got enough.
And what does that feel like?
Exposure.
Like, what is the eye response? How would people be able to identify?
The eye, basically, it helps, helps the body interpret and the skin interpret that it's got enough exposure. And when you've gotten enough exposure, you feel like, oh, I've had enough, or I'm just on the cusp of burning now. You can actually delay that response if you kind of cover up the eyes, because the eyes have more blue light receptors than, you have blue light receptors in all the cells of your body and your nerve system and your brain and your gut. But the super photoreceptors, the super light receptors, are of course the eyes. And
the eyes, wow.
And we're talking about light exposure here. And so you're getting too much ultraviolet exposure, and you're fooling your body that you haven't got enough because of the sunglasses, but also even more so because of the sunscreen, really, because the sunscreen can delay the reddening of the skin response, this nitric oxide response that tells you, hey, my skin's burning, but still getting the ultraviolet absorption. So you're basically allowing your body, by using a modern regular sunscreen, to get more ultraviolet dose than you would normally get.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also, again, we're not doing ancestral. So that would be morning and evening sunlight, where the ratio of blue and ultraviolet to red, near infrared is the lowest. In midday,
Mm-hmm.
there's the most ultraviolet and blue. So the ratio of blue ultraviolet to red, near infrared is the highest at midday. That's why we have hair on our head. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why, most ancestral humans, they were laying under the shade of the tree at midday. They weren't out on the beach at 1 p.m. sunning completely.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we do now. We slather sunscreen on our skin, and the thing is, the whole time that you're out there, you're getting the ultraviolet absorption, and it's the ultraviolet. It does promote vitamin D production. We do have an evolutionary adaptation to that, but it is simultaneously denaturing your DNA. It is mutagenic, absolutely. And even blue light, which if you look on the light spectrum, blue is right next to ultraviolet. Blue is still very high energy. It's not quite ionizing, but it's still very high energy, and it is absolutely causes free radical formation. That's part of the problem with having modern artificial lighting, like LED and fluorescent light. You get a large blue only light source. There's no regenerative red, near infrared like our incandescent lamps that we use in the sauna. It's only this damaging blue, especially LEDs. And that is the damaging component of sunlight. So the issue here is no, we don't want to avoid the sunlight. Yeah, we want sunlight. We want to get sunlight exposure intelligently. And for those of us who are light skinned and we have to be out in the middle of the day, well, what's the solution? I can't wear sunscreen. If it's not good for me, what the hell am I going to do? And the answer is, well, you wear a hat, you wear a shirt.
You go in the shade.
And you go in the shade. But even if you look at cultures or just working populations where they have to be outside in agricultural work, for example, in the summer, when and the sunlight's unavoidable, all of them, whether or not they're light or dark skinned, ethnically, they are all wearing big hats and wearing long sleeve clothes. Because that's the type of protection you need. And it's very fashionable to be naked in a bikini and be wearing sunscreen in the middle of the day, but it's definitely not healthy.
Right. And I mean, there's so much more to this entire conversation in terms of free radicals and your body's own healing response. I know personally that when I'm on a long fast or when I've gone through a period of dietary cleansing to where I'm eating the fastest digesting food, which is fruit, only for an extended period of time, sunburn simply won't happen. And so your body's own response, like your own immunity, you could say to some extent, or your own self-healing capacity will determine the sun's harm upon you or not. I want to ask about
correct. And also, I would add to that, being out early in the beginning at sunrise, that allows the body to build a sun callus, literally. So
sun callus, nice.
Yeah, this is a concept actually. Dr. Jack Cruz, I think, would explain it much better than I ever could. But the idea is even if you're very light skinned, like I am, I have some Irish and English ancestry, among other things. You get out and you get that early sunlight, and then you rest, and you avoid the sun midday, and after a while you get a sun callus, which allows you to be under the sunlight longer in the hotter, more ultraviolet, blue light heavy times of the day, and you don't get burned because you've built up this tolerance. And that's there's a larger discussion of the light therapy, the photobiomodulation, that red, near infrared helps galvanize the body and protect it. Has a cellular protective component against blue UV. So the UV in blue that's causing free radical formation, it's causing aging of the skin. The red, near infrared has a protective role in preventing that damage and reversing it as well. So by getting that early morning dose, you kind of build a callus to the damaging. You mentioned the double-edged sword. That's a perfect explanation of sunlight. It's but you're using one edge of the sword to protect you from the other.
I like that. And so what would be the advice then for people to, of course, include the far infrared or the near infrared in their life, but also to get that early morning sun? Like,
Oh,
in what
absolutely.
latitudes are we talking? Can you give time frames for that? Would you do you
well,
know?
That's a great question. You have to look this up online. It's going to be different at different latitudes.
Yeah.
But you can look this up online. I can provide you with a link that you can.
Cool. That would be awesome.
Later,
I mean, we have listeners here from anywhere from Northern Europe to New Zealand and everywhere in between, lots on the equator as well. So that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and it's going to be different for every latitude and every season, certainly. And of course, the time of sunrise changes each day, but but there's a lot. I mean, if you can get it, and some latitudes and some climates, and actually in some cities, it's harder to see the sunset because of tall buildings or whatever. So it's quite a challenge. Not to mention, in the United States, they perform what's now so benignly called stratospheric. What do they call it? It's stratospheric aerosol injection.
Okay.
Which conspiracy theorists call it chemtrails.
Right.
And it's basically it's hypothesized supposedly, but there is some indication that it's already being tested, and it's called either geoengineering or stratospheric atmospheric injection, where they're using different sulfate salts or like lithium sulfate or different sulfur based salts basically to basically cool the earth to combat global warming or climate change is the purported, the official reason for it. But what it does is it causes cloud formation. And so that kind of makes this hazy. It's literally blocking the sunlight. So, and I can speak to that living here in Columbia, Missouri. It's quite interesting. Maybe it's anecdotal because I just got back from Puerto Rico, but it sure does seem really cloudy here. And for those of you who are not familiar, you can, look this up online. Just look up geoengineering or stratospheric atmospheric injection. And there's, Harvard reviews on it. And it's been discussed in legislatures. It's a thing that's going on. There are lawsuits and patents related to it. So it's definitely not just in the conspiratorial realm. It's becoming more mainstream. And the unfortunate side effect of that is it's blocking the sunlight, and we need our daily dose. And if it's cloudy every day, we're not getting as much near infrared as we could of this healing effect of sunlight. So I didn't mean to go too much into this rabbit hole. It's just another aspect of how hard it is to just to see the sunrise and the sunset every day, even though it's so incredibly healthy, and it has a parasympathetic effect. It's a time to be present, to be mindful.
Very ceremonial, meaningful. Yeah, for sure. I have, before you climb out of the rabbit hole, I have one last question because I think that you might have the answer. For years, I've been sharing or offering that more or less, give or take, that the vitamin D uptake is only 15 minutes necessary between roughly 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Yay or nay? What do you think?
Ooh, I don't feel qualified to answer the question. I would say I would have to get back to you. I know that you can get a big ultraviolet dose really quickly, in midday, very quickly. But it'll vary by latitude. It varies by person. If you're black or very dark skinned, you need maybe 3 or 4 times. My wife, for example, is very dark skinned. You might need 3 or 4 times the dose that I, as a light Northern European kind of skin needs.
So I would wonder then if vitamin D levels are lower in people with more melanin who are living sedentary lives in the northern and southern latitudes of the earth then today.
Oh, I think absolutely. I think that's actually documented that vitamin D levels are low. I think a big part of it is, and I'll defer to my betters certainly in this realm, but we don't get enough sunlight. It's not only source of vitamin D, but it's probably the primary, most important source. You can get vitamin D in your diet, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
but you can get a
Mm-hmm.
ton from having proper exposure to sunlight early morning, late evening, and minimizing your ultraviolet exposure, basically, and getting the right amount. But it also has to do with diet and other things. You know,
Leafy greens.
there's a really interesting study where they and I can dig it up and show you afterwards, but they basically
Mm-hmm.
took a kind of an indigenous population in the equator somewhere in South America, and they they basically fed them all kinds of junk food. So they're normally eating regular, you know, ancestral diet, whatever
Mm-hmm.
they eat, their kind of Stone Age or similar type of indigenous culture. They feed them Coca-Cola and candy and all these other things, but otherwise they're naked under the equatorial sun in
Mm-hmm.
their natural element every day, and they're measuring their microbiome concentration and like the quality of the microbiome as well. And there's interesting throughout the study, you would think that their microbiome would go to hell, and you know they're eating candy bars and Coca-Cola and all this crap. And the interesting conclusion of the study was their microbiome was entirely unaffected by the diet they were consuming. And it's just a primer for this idea that, hey, the microbiome, this thing we hear about nowadays, is a super important aspect of our well-being, this symbiotic relationship we have with these good bacteria and good little creatures in our bodies, that the health of the microbiome, their health, is much more based on exposure to sunlight and light in general than anything you eat. And so this is the power of sunlight. You know, there's also an argument that the majority of our cellular energetic stimulus ought to come from sunlight, that we can actually, like the cellular ATP, so the cellular energy we make, the majority of it ought to come from sunlight. And that's one of the direct effects of near-infrared light. The near-infrared photon hits the mitochondria and it begins to produce more ATP without any added sugar. So we're definitely creatures of light, and we're bioluminescent, and we need to get much more natural, full spectrum light in the natural context into our lives for so many reasons, in the macro and in the micro.
Yeah, and I mean, we know this because seasonal depression disorder is a real thing, as well as chlorotherapy. And I want to know if you've ever worked with that or put colored screens over your bulbs. If you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, of course, you know, I'm not a healthcare provider, so I don't.
It's okay. This is a non-US podcast. You don't need to make medical claims.
Well, I mean, I'm not making any medical claims. This is purely
exactly
purely my personal experience and my take on the science and take on things. But you know, and you just look at, you know, I've got almost 10,000 customers now, and they come from all walks of life. A big portion of them are coming from that. Maybe it's not SADS or seasonal affective disorder. Maybe it's just I feel depressed, and I'm more so in the winter. But it definitely has a mood enhancing effect, and you see that in the human studies. And also, I think there's an analogy like to the sun and to the fireplace. It feels good sitting in front of these sources, and it's the heat feels good, but it's the light literally energizing you and fixing you and making you feel happy that is so relevant. And interestingly, SADS, the medically prescribed treatment is usually an approved SADS lamp, which is a flickering fluorescent light bulb that usually has just a diffuser filter, and you're supposed to sit in front of that. But what is it? It's a sympathetic stimulus. And it's exciting to, you know, that's the part of the addiction. And the problem with sympathetic stimuli is it gets us jacked up and feel good. Really short term, it makes us feel great. Like it's an endorphin rush, but it's not sustainable, and we're not supposed to be in this fight or flight state all the time. So I think that
it's definitely not healing.
Definitely not healing. Whereas here with near-infrared red light, it's a parasympathetic stimulus. It is healing you, and it is, I would say, how you address the root cause of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a flickering fluorescent light in front of you. You need to detox and repair and restore and resculpt the cells of your body and everything, and relax your mind. So I think it's doing wonders for those people, or at least that's the report from our customers. I think it's highly relevant, and the reason people have seasonal affective disorders are not getting enough sunlight. But again, that's 43% near infrared.
Mm-hmm. And in many countries, the weather is just not lovely. Talk to me about tanning beds.
Tanning beds. Well, that's kind of like, what did you call Dr. Kellogg's school of thought? The hygienist?
Natural hygiene.
The natural hygiene. Yeah, that's
the hygienist.
That's kind of like that. Like, let's fractionate one thing out of the natural environment, and that's all you need. And we'll increase the concentration of it dramatically and give you a big, huge dose of it, and that's what you need. Interestingly, that's the I think still the prescription for psoriasis. And plaque psoriasis is ultraviolet, a tanning bed, basically ultraviolet light exposure. Again, masking the symptoms instead of addressing the root cause. The psoriasis is some kind of autoimmune issue. The body is, and the skin is showing, hey, there's a deep problem inside my body. And
intestines.
Intestines, many other things, but whatever it is, it's manifesting in the skin. And so the solution is not just to burn it out. It should be, let's heal the inside. And so I again think that cleansing the body is the solution, and rebuilding the body. The body has intelligent healing systems, and we can do so. We can get, I would say, higher, we get more value. We get more benefit at lower risk using like what we do here at SaunaSpace than most of these conventional medical offerings. And that's what people do when they buy stuff. They buy phones, is they use that consumer logic. What's my best cost benefit ratio? I want to maximize benefit and minimize risk. And so what we're doing here is we're saying the minimum way to do things, and yet the most effective, is to leverage the body's own intelligent healing systems. And we have these light therapy systems in every cell of the body, the mitochondria in every cell of the body, the smart water, and the heat shock proteins, and the resculptors and the rebuilders really everywhere. And what a simple way is just, and also an opportunity, I would say, to meditate and relax and be present. And maybe it's you listen to music, or maybe you actually do a concentration or a meditative practice. But all these things can be gotten in 20 or 30 minutes of just sitting there. It's really amazing.
Okay, Brian, I definitely want to get into talking about radiation and whatnot, but I have a super random question that you might not have the answer to, and I want to ask it because the sun has set here in northern Brazil where I am, and as I mentioned to you before the call, I'm on a rooftop, and now that the sun is set, I'm at that glorious glowing hour where the stars are just starting to come out. And so a bit of a cosmic question for you, because I have to my right here, I have the constellation of Orion and Betelgeuse and Bellatrix, his shoulders. And then under that, I have Taurus and Aldebaran. And right now, Mars is visible. And so I'm wondering, actually, the light from the stars, do you think it has an effect? And or the naked eye gazing up at the stars, do you think there's an effect?
Yeah.
Physiologically, of course.
Well, there is. I mean, it's light. I mean, we're naturally attracted to light. We're like moths to a flame. There is a particular, I think, spiritual and mystical value to starlight, and I'm definitely out of my element here. There's people who could speak to this much better than I could, but it's definitely, there's a reason it's part of a lot of our mystical traditions and other things, that it's an entirely different type of light than our the blue light from our phone. That's it's flickering LED light. First of all, they're DC, they're direct current. So the sun and the stars, all these burning bodies of light in the universe, or in the solar systems around us and in the galaxy, are a constant source of light. So it's kind of like, you could call it analog light.
Okay.
And that's what we're used to. So it's definitely beneficial. And I think we are designed to get it. And that's probably the only type of good, healthy, visible or blue light I think that you could get is definitely the starlight after dark. There's, it's really quite amazing. But also the light of the fire and the lamps here. You asked about color filters before. We use only glass, and that's our new our new light bulb design that we're coming out with very soon. Is it uses red stained glass, and the red glass filters out almost perfectly blue light wavelengths and some ultraviolet stuff too. So it's blue light that people, if they're not aware, it suppresses melatonin production and basically tells you when to be awake. And so you get blue light from the sun, it's time to be up. And when the sun sets at sunset, you have no more blue light. You begin to produce your sleep hormone melatonin, and your body gets ready to go to bed. And so the fireplace and our SaunaSpace lamps and others, and the candle are kind of for the most part, are because it's like more reddish and not so blue, or there's not really any blue wavelengths or very little. It's an acceptable form of light after dark is red light in the fireplace and stuff. The things that are really unacceptable are blue light, because you're telling your body, oh, you should still be awake. But
and for everyone listening, your phone is on your computer screen and the TV, blue light.
Blue light, and it's flickering light. So if we were on video, I could show you my flicker meter, and you can measure the flicker rate of light. And flickering light has definitely has biological effects, adverse effects. It's basically a giant strobing light that promotes sympathetic dominance. It's associated with migraines and psychological issues, and that's what almost all electrically powered lighting in our homes and stuff is all flickering all the time. So it's very unhealthy. And then it's all blue. And so these are all things that we don't want to get after dark. Not to mention the electromagnetic stress that comes along with so many of them.
And to make this real, like maybe using candles more at night, starting to wind down, and or going to your sauna at night, would you say?
Yeah, or using red light bulbs. So incandescent red filtered bulbs don't have any blue. And, for example, our photon light, it's just one bulb in a fixture we've designed. People use that for targeted spot therapy on the body, but they also use it for blue light free light after dark. So if you want light in your living room, you definitely don't want to use LEDs or fluorescent lights. And so when you don't want to sit there in complete darkness. Well, that's kind of what our lamp is. It's kind of like a modern fireplace. You don't have the smoke and stuff, and there's a charm to that for sure. But just day to day in your house, it's what I would call a safe form of lighting that you can use after dark. And so I would do all those things. I would try not to watch TV or be on the computer after dark, as hard as that sounds. If you're going to watch a movie, you're better off watching it in the day. And then of course, like what we need to talk about before we're done is the elephant in the room that is man-made electromagnetism, and what a problem it is. And it's related to all these sources we're talking about now, all these devices, all this modernity that surrounds us.
I'm really refraining from making an elephant sound, so please tell us.
Well, it's I just listened to a talk with Dr. Mercola, and he said, he had a nice way of describing it. He said, there's a billion times more microwave signal flying around today than there was 100 years ago.
Billion, is that a number?
There may be a word for that, but it's just it's an unfathomable increase in concentration of a synthetic wavelength. Yes, there is microwave that's natural
Mm-hmm.
It's basically microwave is what we use in our microwave ovens. That's why we call it that. When you take a signal in the kind of 1 to 2 gigahertz range or the sub 1 gigahertz range, and you shine it on a human tissue or on any water molecule with enough wattage, it makes the water molecules vibrate faster, and that's how your microwave oven heats your food up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how the telecom industry measures whether the microwave signal from the cell phone towers is damaging. Is it heating up the tissue? And so that's the safety standard. So as long as the wattage is not enough to heat up your tissues in your body by vibrating the water, by being absorbed by the water molecules and vibrating more, then it's not damaging, right? Well, the answer is no. That's completely wrong. It's off by actually a factor of about 7 million. And the reason for that is that you have these things called voltage-gated calcium ion channels in the body. And for those of you who want to dive deep, you can look up Dr. Martin Paul's work. He's done some really great interviews, but also you can read some of his research. You know, he deserves a Medal of Honor or a Nobel Prize or something for what he's done.
We will give him one right now.
So yeah, I would like to nominate him. He basically said, hey, these microwave signals are affecting our biology, and it's by opening our calcium channels. So the calcium evolutionarily was like one of the most fundamental cell signalers back in the day of the mitochondria and the prokaryotic cell, when they came together and they made the animal cell and they formed a symbiotic relationship. You know, one of the primary ways they talk to each other and how the cell controls the mitochondria is with calcium ions, calcium 2 plus ions. So fundamental.
It's also how we flex muscles.
It's exactly, yeah. That's
contraction.
It helps with contraction. It helps with cell motility. It helps if you have a huge flood of calcium into the cell, it causes apoptosis, cell death. That's part of how the body controls cell growth and controls its mitochondria. It also it activates mitochondrial production, so it increases the free radical formation, but also the ATP production and the nitric oxide and stuff like that. And these are voltage gates, so they're triggered by a change in voltage, so a difference in electrical potential inside and outside of the cell. And basically, in short, these voltage gates in every cell of the body, a fundamental cell signaler that are controlling the calcium everywhere, are 7 million times more sensitive to microwave signal, to electric field signal, than an aqueous water molecule. So that's another way of saying that the safety standards are off by 7 million times. That it takes 7 million times less electric field power to activate the calcium ions gates. So what that means is when the microwave signal from the cell phone tower hits your body, all of the calcium ion channels open in all of your cells, and you get like millions of calcium ions per second going into your cells, which messes up with all the cell signaling. It can cause cell death. It causes massive free radical formation, where a little bit of nitric oxide is good, but when you get way too much, that leads to what's called the peroxynitrite free radical cycle. Peroxynitrite dysfunction is associated very strongly in the literature with a lot of disease like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. It's a damaging free radical cycle in your body, basically. And so those are the two ways that EMFs damage the body. They cause the calcium gates to open, and they cause massive free radical formation through the peroxynitrate cycle. And so both of those things feed into each other and damage the body. And so we see this is not just, getting out of the micro and going into the macro. It's not just at the cell level. There's clinical associations now with heart disease, cancer, insomnia, basically neurological diseases, neurological issues, big time. And that's because the highest density of the calcium voltage gates in the body is in the brain and in the heart and the nerve tissue. So of course, people who have neuropathic disease like MS and fibromyalgia and stuff seem to be more sensitive to this. They seem to be more adversely affected. But unfortunately, it's not something that, or I say what's frustrating about it is it's not something that kills you in a day. It's something that just slowly wears you down, and as disturbing as this may sound, I would liken it to, I would make an analogy with HIV.
Mm-hmm.
It's HIV doesn't kill you. It's a secondary infection due to the, or it's some kind of secondary thing due to the original HIV infection that we call AIDS, and you die of pneumonia or something one day. But it was the HIV that started it, and in a
Lowered
way,
immunity in general. Yeah.
it slowly damages your cellular systems. It slowly causes free radical formation, which damages your DNA and causes mutation and
Mm-hmm.
wears out the body and promotes, sympathetic dominance and damages, just causes damage to proteins and other things. And it won't kill you in a day or a week, but it will weaken you and make you more susceptible to other things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a cumulative effect. So the people who are living next to a cell phone tower or getting really high doses every day, they're going to have increased, dramatically increased incidence of symptoms over time than those of us are getting a little bit. But here's another thing to put in perspective. Carrying a cell phone for a few days causes more free radical formation, more damage really to the cells than an X-ray does at the doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's in fact more damaging than an ionizing source of radiation, which I've basically given you the two ways how non-ionizing radiation, so a microwave signal, even though it's not an X-ray, it's not ionizing you and ripping your DNA apart, it can, through secondary effects, cause the same and even greater damage than an ionizing radiation source like X-rays do. So, and probably more sinister is that where can you not get a cell phone signal?
In the countryside where there's no cell phone tower?
It's increasingly, these places are shrinking on Earth. There are still some
Right.
places, but here in the West, people think, oh, well, I don't have my cell phone, I'm all right. No, everywhere you're standing where you can get a cell phone signal,
Mm-hmm.
you're getting all of that microwave stress in your body. It's opening your calcium channels. It's causing free radical formation and damage. And so it's 24 hours a day. At least if it was a chemical stress, like chemicals in your food, you could change your diet, or make your own garden or something. But cell phone signal, it's very difficult to escape, almost impossible
Mm-hmm.
here in the wet in the civilized areas. And of course 5G we have that's rolling out now in America and in Western cities. It's a pretty pervasive new source of microwave signal where there's more wattage than ever, and more higher frequencies are being introduced as well. So it's something where that billion I just mentioned, that's going to be a billion sometimes.
We're getting up to 1 trillion. Okay, wow. So we're talking about all of this radiation outside of us. It's damaging, and I understand that you two provide this little sheath or this layer along with the sauna, and I like that concept of kind of doubling up or being most effective, most efficient. And I want to ask you if you have any other version. Like, let's say I could just wear a jumpsuit of the same material every day, or is there any kind of modern innovation that you know of to protect us?
Well, I mean, the solution in some ways is very simple and also maddeningly complicated
Mm-hmm.
and complex. So metal blocks electromagnetic signals, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different forms of metal. That's what a Faraday box is, or, what people understand in laboratory sense, a scientific sense. A Faraday cage is basically a 6-sided metal box that prevents electric fields from coming in
Mm-hmm.
and from going out, really. So you can do it with metal. The question is, how do you do it in a way that's like practical and effective? So if you want to block microwave signal, you need to have really complete 6-sided protection. So, and you can't have any gaps in that protective sheath, as you called it.
Mm-hmm.
But you also want something that you can breathe in, because if it's
Mm-hmm.
hermetically sealed, you're not going to get much oxygen. You aren't going to last very long. So that's kind of the challenge that we've been dealing with in our sauna to start
Mm-hmm.
out with, is is how can we make a Faraday cage that blocks the microwave signal, but also is grounded, because you need it to be grounded to kind of drain out the low frequency electric fields from electricity from wiring in the home, so that you don't have any you don't have any voltage buildup. Otherwise you get buildup from the wired electric fields, and also you can even get buildup of the RF, where the RF will the microwave signal, the electric field in the air, gets absorbed by some piece of metal, and then it conducts to you.
Mm-hmm.
You want to create a cage that is both a metallic shield and it's grounded, and therein comes the challenge. So you can get material that blocks microwave signal really well, but it's not grounded, or it's not groundable. So you need a groundable layer. Or our solution here is we use a custom made stainless steel based material that it's really finely woven stainless steel that the threads are so fine together that it blocks these high frequency microwave signals in the air really well. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also grounded and by that I mean it's directly connected with wires to the ground system, the ground cable of the light panel of the light fixture inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be plugged into the wall, into a grounded source. And that's how you get full protection from low and high frequency. You have the barrier, and you have the earthing grounding effect, which is what that literally means. When you're earthing, why walking barefoot, is you're
Mm-hmm.
discharging your body's junk voltage. It's cleaning up the voltage in your body, and it feels good, and it definitely has positive biological effects that are demonstrated in studies, and people know this feels amazing, and that's why we do this. You can recreate that. We recreated that effect in our sauna, and that's part of why it feels so groovy and relaxing in there. But it was done through pretty tricky product design. And so that's the issue with, you should, well, why can't I wear just a jumpsuit? Why can't I just wear this like cool, like, kind of like birthday suit or something with a hoodie on it? Or because you need to be grounded as well. And so how do you ground while you're walking around? Like
Earth shoes?
you could, but how do you do it in a way that's like practical and it's constantly connected? So every time your foot goes up, you're losing your ground and you're getting voltage buildup again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tricky. I mean, I would say I don't like to think of it as a impossible conundrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I would address it in two ways. I would say, look, you got to live in. For most of us, we're not in an area where there's no cell phone signal. We're living here in civilization. We're living here in modern life.
Mm-hmm.
You need to protect your healing space from man-made EMF, and you need to protect your sleeping space, your bed space, from man-made EMF. If you hit those two areas, I think you're maximizing your healing benefit, like in our SaunaSpace sauna. And then at sleep, you sleep people sleep for a quarter or a third of their life, and so that's a very important healing restorative time is proper sleep. And so that's the other area that you need to address. You address those things, and then I think it doesn't really matter in your day-to-day. You go out into the world, you get electromagnetic stress, you get chemical stress, you get people yelling at you, emotional, spiritual stress, you have conflicts, you get kind of jacked, you get into sympathetic stress mode. But then, for me, I get into my sauna every night, and then at home, you can turn off your Wi-Fi, for example. You want to put your phone into airplane mode. Make the difficult transition to not having TV, or even worse than TV is like blogging or just searching for stuff online, because there's so much information and it's really addicting and it's fun. But to not be just wrapped up in your TV or your computer monitor after dark every day.
Go analog after dark. Amazing. Super, super, super amazing. I've enjoyed so much of this discussion, and I mean, it just opens the door to a whole host of other questions, and I feel like we could title it Physics and Your Physicality or something like that. And just to plant an idea seed, I'm super curious about the extra voltage in my imaginary stainless steel jumpsuit of like if there could be some kind of battery pack or something that voltage could be used for before it's discharged to the earth or something. So I'll plant that seed later. Anyone listening can follow up with me, or Brian, we can jam on.
Yeah, I mean,
after the call.
there's definitely, I mean, we need to come up with solutions, and it's not, there's not an answer to it, you know, and we need, that's one thing, but yeah, addressing your home, addressing where you hang out all the time, addressing your habits, and then also understanding that it's not just this cumulative, this EMF stress. It's not just something like where you're building up this poison in your body and you're stuck with it. You can actually reverse that damage. That's one last tie-in that I would mention that is a part of my newer understanding, really, of sauna. So I talked about peroxynitrite before, this damaging oxidative stress cycle in the body that's really associated with disease. That's one of the primary effects of EMF stress. So what's interesting about sauna is in two ways, not just one way, but by two different biological pathways, heat stress reverses that peroxynitrite cycle damage. It's heat stress. So heat in the sauna, sitting in the sauna, literally reverses the same cellular damage mechanism that electromagnetic stress causes. So when you sit in my sauna and you have the shielded version where you have the external wireless shield, you're not just protected from EMF, you're literally reversing those same damaging pathways that the day's electromagnetic stress caused to you. And so it's just another example of really hundreds, if not thousands, of ways that heat stress is passive heat stress, and sweating is this kind of like magical elixir of that fixes all problems in all cells slowly but surely. Even this modern threat of man-made EMF can be kind of reversed with heat stress, and one of those ways too is what are the ways the heat stress helps is it resculpts the vascular systems of your body. It promotes more blood flow, but it also gets your blood vessels to like rebuild the walls and build new blood vessels in new areas where you're literally remapping your blood's tributaries in your body in an intelligent way, in the way that the body needs it at, for where you are now. Really fascinating.
I love it. So I want to do something now, if you'll play with me for a second. I want you to just give your intuitive yes or no. And I know that's going to be difficult after so many words and big ideas, but just an intuitive hit on yes or no, whether these are forms of modern life that you would recommend to people or not. Because we do have so many biohacking or other ways in which we're trying to undo the negative effects of modern human life, and you're proposing a very solid solution. I do see you as an authority in the space of all things light and vibrational. So are you ready for this?
Okay, so you don't want any explanatory statements. You want yes or no? Okay.
If it's really necessary, you can explain, but like an intuitive hit. I'm going to name a few things. All right. The first one is Bikram yoga.
Damn it, it's a maybe. I personally prefer Iyengar yoga. I prefer a more controlled type of yoga of Iyengar, but better Bikram yoga than no yoga.
And Bikram's the heated room, you know that?
Yeah, the heated yoga.
And heated
humidity. I prefer Iyengar, but it's not for everybody. But if it's yoga or no yoga, I say yes.
Okay. How about cryotherapy?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we're getting cold. How about the Wim Hof method? The breathing.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We have many of our customers do Wim Hof, in the SaunaSpace.
Yeah, Wim's a friend.
Hey, going back thousands of years, hot, cold, hot. You did sauna, and then you jumped in the frozen lake and got warm again. cold thermogenesis is what it's called at the cell level, and that has
Mm-hmm.
many of the same effects on the mitochondria as heat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how about drinking cold water, ice water?
No.
Shock to the body. We know that one. All right, how about drinking hot water?
It has its place if it's a good cup of tea or a good coffee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I usually, if it's just water, I drink room temperature water.
Mm-hmm. Room temperature water. Okay.
Okay,
Salt there.
sometimes I love having a cold glass of like San Pellegrino or something.
Okay. Salt therapy.
I think it has its place, yes.
You've heard of this one? There's salt rooms where you're like breathing salty air.
Yeah, and there's stones, like blocks of salt on the floor.
Mm-hmm. And lights, the little pink lights. Okay, that's a yes. Okay. How about the zapper? Have you heard of the zapper, the parasite zapper?
Explain.
Different charges that you're holding in your hand sends an electromagnetic current through the body to essentially vibrate and kill the parasites, if any.
I don't have an answer yet. Haven't tried it.
Okay, more information on that. Okay, and then last but not least, the infiltration of smartwatches, specifically advanced ones like the Apple Watch right there at your very sensitive pulse place.
Absolutely not. It's a permanent Bluetooth transmitter
Mm-hmm.
on your body. That's the whole issue with EMF is the power level is proportionate to kind of like 1 over the distance from the power source squared. So, if it's right on your body, it's much worse than it being only an inch away from your body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with a cell phone. And when, it pains me to see women have their cell phone tucked into their bra, or
Mm-hmm.
they're tucked into their butt pocket right next to their ovaries, or for men
Mm-hmm.
right next to their, that's all where all your vital organs are. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And for
Yep.
what? To be more connected? We're already pretty connected. I think when you're in the physical presence of someone else, be there, and you have limbic regulation, and where you're literally regulating each other's physiology. This has to do with our limbic brain and emotional connection, and
Mm-hmm.
give that person the respect that they deserve. They took the time to be there in person with you. Put your Apple Watch down, your phone down.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
don't
I
wear
like that.
and I don't see the value in it. It's just another gadget, and our lives are so complicated already. We need more. We need to decomplicate. We need more simplicity. We need to get back to
Mm-hmm.
basics. Less
Yeah,
devices.
and I mean, excitingly enough, simplicity is coming through technology. I ordered on Amazon an Apple Watch a few weeks ago, and I had to immediately return it because I put it on and I was like, oh, I cannot wear this because I feel it palpably, the effect that it has on the body, just being so sensitive after so many years of a fasting practice and an awareness practice. And however, the reason I got it is because I work in AI now, and I do work in biofeedback. And whereas like the technology can help us to be more aware of our natural physiological currents when we think at a large scale for the modern man, because of course anyone listening to this podcast, you, me, anyone who's interested in health, we're going to heighten our awareness to be able to do that on our own. But in the plight of modern man, we have to use the vehicle of technology. So my question would be, or I guess it's just like an inquiry to the cosmos of what could be this barrier between to somehow in one way or another protect us, or to I guess buffer that. It's kind of like my jumpsuit question.
Yeah, I ask myself the same thing, and I use a cell phone every day, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
also a sinner here, but I use it for good. I use it.
Mm-hmm.
I use it as a a productivity tool and an occupational tool to like bring good to people and good to the earth. And it is a compromise, but I use it in the most disciplined way possible. And I try really hard to just put it into airplane mode, not just before bed, but when I go home, so that I can be present with my
Mm-hmm.
family and not be distracted by working or other things. But there's no doubt that look at my product. I mean, I don't mean to keep coming back to my product. I'd rather this be more educational than anything else. It's just, an example of hey, technology can be good. We can use
Mhm.
technology for good,
Mhm.
but we need to be really careful. It's a real we're walking a tightrope. The Apple
Mhm.
Watch, for example, turn it into airplane mode, so there's no transmitter. It's not
Mhm.
transmitting Bluetooth or cell phone or anything, and
Mhm.
it can be a great diagnostic tool, just like the Aura Ring. If it's in airplane mode or whatever,
Mhm.
um, we can use it. We can use the data and other things to improve our lot in life and improve our quality of life. But
Mhm.
we need to be careful that it doesn't become the focus of our life and an obsession. And of course, we become this. Sometimes I feel like a slave to the phone, and
Yep.
that's part of me reasserting my dominance. It's going in airplane mode, and I'm not listening to it anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because but it is, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to use these technologies, but for good. And that's kind of why I love what I do. I mean, it's so exciting to have all these amazing technologies nowadays to make to help us get to these breakthroughs and improving quality of life, but also keep in mind that, hey, our the best health comes from a return to nature, a return to natural context,
Mhm.
and we can't forget that.
Mhm. Mhm. So I like that distinction then between Apple Watch and the Bluetooth receptivity, airplane mode turned on versus like your average wearable. I won't name any brand names, but just like a wearable that doesn't have the Bluetooth capability, or at least, or even the phone capability or anything like that. Those definitely safer.
Well, those are like the I won't name names either, even though we've already named them, but those performance trackers, the really popular ones, most of those are
Hmm.
Bluetooth enabled, and
Okay.
that's how the data is transmitted, the steps you do and your pulse,
Hmm.
whatever it's tracking. It's typically Bluetooth enabled. Almost all of them are. So, does it have a airplane mode? Does it have a functionality where you can turn it into so it
Off.
doesn't transmit?
Yeah.
And I'm not familiar with all the products out there, but increasingly it's being seen as like a standard feature. Well, it's Bluetooth
Hmm.
enabled, whatever it is,
Hmm.
and it's not necessarily a good thing. That's why in my in a SaunaSpace sauna, there's not the Bluetooth speakers, there's no LED
Hmm.
track lighting, there's no
Hmm.
glass doors.
Hmm.
I'm trying as hard as I can design wise to put you back into a natural context and take away all of the sensory overload and overstimulating world that you have all around you, and that
Hmm.
is visual, it's electromagnetic, it's audio, it's everything. um, so it's not an advantage. And so yeah, in some places it's good, but in general, Bluetooth is high frequency. What is it? It's 2.4 gigahertz, I think.
Hmm.
So it's in the microwave, the microwave plus range. It's high frequency stuff, and you always have it right next to you, and that's the
Hmm.
problem. Is
And
that
the earbuds.
yeah, those in those new wireless Bluetooth earbuds,
Hmm.
especially, like they're so cool looking, right? Everybody has them now, and I actually have a pair. And I was
Hmm.
curious to use them, and I honestly cannot wear it more than about 5 minutes. My head starts heating up, and I start getting weird tingling on that side. And
Mm.
so I'm speaking to you now through a wired connection through my computer. I have a setup in my
Mhm.
office where I don't call anybody on my cell phone. My cell phone sits here most of the time in airplane. I
Mhm.
I communicate through a wire connection, and I
Mhm.
try to not have Wi-Fi. There's Wi-Fi in the greater shop, but it's kind of turned off in the office. And I'm taking steps to mitigate and minimize my exposure as much as I can. And especially for those of you who are young, the 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 developing brain and the developing nervous system are so susceptible to electromagnetic
Mhm.
stress. And you and I don't know how old you are, but I assume you didn't grow up with a cell phone most of your life.
Mhm.
I didn't either. And really, when we were really young, and that was only 2G, and when we were really young, there was nothing, just wired voltage from the house. Nowadays, babies are being born, young children are growing up with a massive amount of microwave stress 24 hours a day, all the time. And And you bet it's affecting them. And you bet it's affecting us.
I wonder if there's any adaptation to somehow strengthen against it, or not allow it to bother them, or not allow it to stimulate or disrupt their nervous system, because it is the norm that they were born into.
Well, you have more than one study that's investigated this, and there's certainly more research to be done. But if you put like a EMF blocking canopy over a baby's crib, there's one study where nodal cord development, so the development of the neural tree and like the spine and stuff, the nervous tree was much better when they were under protection, because it is so sensitive to electromagnetic stress, and when you're young, the development is so crucial. It's just like anything else. So there is, all indications are that it's damaging. When what's healthy and healing and are things from the natural context, the natural frequency of light from the sun, the Schumann frequency that the earth resonates at. These are things that are, these are the good EMFs, the ones that have been there for 1 billion years. But all of the man-made ones, most of them seem to be problematic. Some are healthy. There's some, like what we're doing here with the incandescent bulb. There's certain ultrasonic therapies that are have shown to provide a lot of like pain relief and other things. I know there's a number of them. There's different. There's you can use frequency for good. It's not all for bad, but the devil's in the details. Which frequencies and what, and the things that we use for modern convenience, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular signal, those are all pretty bad in general. There's not really anything good about it, other than the technological benefits that come with it.
So rich, so much, so cool. Is there anything else that you want to share, Brian, or how can people reach you, or if you want to share the website of the product or anything like that?
Yeah, it's all on saunaspace.com. You can dive deep into my articles if you like that kind of stuff, and read the boring stuff. And you can and that will lead you to the PubMed and literature if you want. You can also listen to other recordings I've done. I've done a number of them where we focus on this topic or that topic, but it's all on saunaspace.com for those who want to explore that. And if you're interested in a totally unique product and therapeutic and rejuvenative experience, well, we're definitely it. And we're pretty generous in trial and how you can try it out risk-free. And it seems to be working for so many people nowadays. It's super exciting for me. And if you want to reach us too, you can email sales@saunaspace.com. You can even call up and ask for me. I'm usually here working in the shop, and loving every day of it.
So lovely. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Brian. It's been super, super, super full. And thank you to everyone listening. I hope you've enjoyed.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Vitality Podcast. Please click over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review to spread this work with the world. You have a part in transforming humanity's health. Keep enjoying this free resource and make sure to give back by sharing, subscribing, and checking out all of Andrea's work at liveforvitality.com, where you can find links to Instagram and other social media. Andrea also gives astrology readings, holds online fasting retreats, and teaches detox courses and advanced yoga teacher trainings. So come to liveforvitality.com and let Andrea transform your life now.